Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, welcome to this lab report workshop lecture session that we have here today. This session will be conducted and presented by one of our senior writing consultants, Duncan Osborne. I'll give him the opportunity to introduce himself in just a little bit. I know Professor Bringarn mentioned this in lecture last week, but in case you did not hear him say that, or you're absent, or whatever it may be, for attending this session, you do have the opportunity to rewrite your first lab reports. Right? So that is the extra credit that you get for attending this session. Today's session is meant to be like an A to Z on how to write a lab report. So specifically, Duncan will be targeting portions of the lab report relating to Lab 1. I know many of you got scores in the range of 40 to 50 to 60. You went, okay, maybe lower than that. So hopefully, between the comments that your writing consultant and TAs gave you for Lab 1 and the presentation today, you'll be able to make some of that difference and be able to earn yourself a really good grade on Lab 1. All right, so without further ado, Duncan?
Okay, my name is Duncan Osborne. I've been teaching writing in this course since 2004, so I think I can say I have, oh, this is not on. Pardon me. How's that? So I've been teaching writing in this course since 2004, so I believe I've got at least some knowledge about how to write a good lab report in EG. So the intent here is to give you information that will assist you not only in your rewrite of Lab 1, should you choose to do that, but also in the lab reports that you'll be writing over the course of the semester through the beginning of December, pardon me. This rewrite of the lab report, if you choose to do that, is due the night before you will do what would be Lab 6, which is your first model shop session. Is that correct? Right.
It's due the night before Lab 7.
It's due the night before Lab 7. Check the syllabus for your section for that specific date. But what that does mean is that you've got some time to write this lab report so you can do a really bang-up job on it, right? Okay. Let's talk about writing lab reports. First of all, the writing that you're doing in this class is probably different than what you've been used to doing when you were in high school. And so this is really about transitioning to a different kind of writing, specifically as this author, Keith Borchoy, refers to it as college writing. Essentially what he's doing with these three questions that he's asking is essentially what you're doing in the lab report for the major sections that you're writing in this class. These are the general questions that you're asking and answering in the lab reports. So your technical writing in this class, the reports, is a form of storytelling, or at least you should think of it as a form of storytelling. The data that you produce in the lab exercise tells the story. The data is the central element of the report. Portions of your data should be in your abstract. All of your data should be in your data and observation section. And a fair amount of data, perhaps even all of your data, should be in your conclusion. Your report's an argument. Your data supports one conclusion, and you should be arguing for that conclusion from the start of your lab report until at the end of your lab report. It's not on the one hand and on the other hand. I tell my students in my sections that their report should be about 1,200 to 1,500 words long. Some reports will be longer. For example, you're about to do Lab 3 this week. Some of you may have already turned in Lab 3. Your report should probably be longer than 1,500 words in Lab 3. I strongly recommend that for every lab report, you make an outline for that lab report. You go to the assignment section in the manual, copy and paste the questions and the things that we ask you to respond to in the assignment section into your outline, into the section of the report where you propose to answer that question or respond to that comment. So that'll help you write a more complete, a more thorough lab report. These are the major sections. At this point, I assume you're all familiar with them. So the abstract is a summary of a report. You're going to write it last. It's written in the past tense. This would be an example of an abstract for Lab 1B, the virtual product dissection. Right, so it talks about you had a goal, your objective was to create a water toy for children aged 4 to 6. Then you did product dissection. You incorporated some components of what you learned in product dissection in the water toy. So you changed the design of the water toy from when you first conceived of it to when you had the final design. So the introduction should be at least 3 paragraphs long. It's the concepts, the formulas, the laws, the principles, everything the reader needs to know to understand your data. So for Lab 1B, you had to talk about the engineering design process, you had to talk about product dissection, and you had to talk about design fixation. For your other labs in this section, it's the background material, formulas, laws, principles. For competition labs, you must include at the end of this section a discussion of the rules. You've got to have the ratios that judge the competition there, and then the final paragraph is a discussion of your design strategy. How did you take all of this information that you presented in the introduction and synthesize it, implement it in your design with an eye toward winning the competition? That's your design strategy. I see some of you taking pictures and writing this down. This PowerPoint is going to be posted on eg.poly.edu today. This week. Also, if you send me an email at dto223@nyu.edu, I will be happy to send a copy of this PowerPoint to you. That's dto223@nyu.edu. You can also find my email address on eg.poly.edu under the Writing Consultants link. That is my NYU address, correct? So you can find it there as well. So you can continue taking notes if you want to, but I'm also happy to send this to you. Just drop me an email. So the introduction, general to specific, right? So for example, on the boom competition lab, you want to start by talking about booms, the types of stresses that impact booms, the definitions of stress and strain, aging factors. Then you want to turn your attention to the rules, the ratios, and a discussion of your design strategy. But this would be an example right here of the start of an introduction section for Lab 1B, where it's talking about the engineering design process. This might be the first paragraph for Lab 1B that you would use in a lab report. And you'll notice here, NYU, 2019, this is how we ask you to make reference to the manual, which should be listed in your works cited section at the end of the report, right? And this is how you do a citation. So everywhere that you're relying on the manual, you have this citation at the end of the paragraph where you're relying on the manual. Right? So that's what we expect you to do. Your procedure section, the essence of the section is repeatability. I should be able to follow your description and replicate your results. It's got to be that complete. You can save yourself some time writing by including pictures in this section. So let's say for the boom competition lab, if one member of your team was tasked with taking pictures of the boom as you were building it, you share those pictures with the members of the team, and those pictures of the boom being built can go into the procedure section. You make reference to them in your text. So you can write a little bit less. And I got to tell you, it's just much easier to understand a procedure section if there are pictures in it. Right? If all you have is text in there, I'm left sort of thinking, I think I know what this looks like. I'm kind of imagining what this is, but I'm not really getting it. So pictures are a tremendous help in this section. It's assumed to be written in chronological order, so there should be no first, second, third, next, then. You list the materials that you use in the first sentence of this section. The materials used were, then list them. And again, use pictures. Pictures in this section. This would be an example of the start of a procedure section for Lab 1B, right? Materials listed first, then a discussion of the 2 brainstorming sessions that you had for paper clips and for your water toy design. Data and observations, this is where you present your data. You do not analyze your data here, you simply present your data. So, for Lab 1B, it would be pictures of the dissected products that you did. So, let's say you had a picture and you did the Nerf gun, you dissected that, it would be labeled like so, figure 1, Nerf gun with a period at the end. You have to discuss the power supply, energy source, and these other 3 items in this section. That's a description of the thing, what these various elements were in the thing where they were present. For other labs, you're doing the same thing. You're simply presenting your data. So for competition labs, you'll have that Excel spreadsheet that the TAs create for you that you download from lab documents on eg.poly.edu. Something to bear in mind about those documents, the TAs commonly put multiple pages at different tabs on that document. So when you download it, you've got to check the tabs because the data you want is in one of the tabs. It's not on the first page, it's in one of the other tabs. So always check the tabs. So you present your data for a competition results. You would have a table, that table that I just talked about, labeled like so, table 1, competition results. You would discuss the trial results and the competition results. If you have pictures of the other competitors, generally students don't have that, but if you do, they would be here, they would be labeled, and you discuss them. But when I say you're presenting your data, what I mean is the following. If this was, say, the Boom competition lab, your first paragraph would be a relatively short discussion of what your boom looked like assembled on the anchorage. The next paragraph would be a presentation of your boom's weight, its length, its anchor time, and the weight held, its unweighted ratio, and its weighted ratio. Then you would do the exact same data for the other competitors in the competition. You're just presenting the data in a series of paragraphs here. That's all you're doing in this section. So this would be an example of a Nerf gun for Lab 1B. Again, labeled at the bottom like so, exploded view, a picture of the thing right there. So then for tables, the label and the caption go above the table. This is a rule that we use consistently in this course. So figures, it's below. Tables, it's above. Right? Everything that is not a table is a figure. Right? But that's the general rule that we have in this class. So this would be an example of the first couple of paragraphs for a data and observation section for the boom competition lab, right? So the boom, figure 1, referring to this. No, I'm sorry, that's not the boom, pardon me. That's the Nerf gun. The boom, figure 1, that would be a picture of the boom. You can see here is a relatively short description of how the boom was built. There should be some additional information here of what it looked like set up on the anchorage. Then the next paragraph is a discussion of the presentation of the boom weight, boom length, anchor time, and unweighted and weighted ratios. And then it's standing in the competition and a reference to the table, as you can see right there, table 1. And that's how you refer to table 1 in the text, like so. Right? Everyone got it? So then finally, in your conclusion section, this is where you analyze the data. For Lab 1B, you wanted to discuss your water toy design before what it looked like before you did the product dissection, and what you would do to it after you did the product dissection, and how the design was further informed by what you learned in the product dissection. You have to discuss whether or not design fixation played a role in this exercise, and then you have to talk about the benefits of dissecting multiple products. For other labs, you've got to analyze the data specifically. For a competition lab, and let's talk about the boom competition lab, you would go back to this data that you presented. So here your analysis has to be, you look at 1 and 2, right? 1.49 and 1.21 were the weighted ratios. Then third and fourth had ratios that weren't very good compared to 1 and 2. So it might be possible in that case to say that those two things need to be, well, actually, let me amend that. You might be tempted in this case to say that those two booms need to be redesigned because their ratios were significantly below the ratios achieved by 1 and 2. But then you've got to do this kind of interesting thing, is you've got to look at the weight held by 3 and 4. Those were the first and second highest weights held in this lab exercise. So they did something right. Right? So you've got to pay attention to all of that data there. So then your analysis has got to look at the anchor time, and that would appear to have controlled the result of this exercise. Right? Because 1 and 2, were both below 30 seconds at 29 and 25 seconds. 3 and 4 were at 70 seconds and 101 seconds. And then you might consider looking at boom weight. That might have had some impact. I think boom length you don't have to pay any attention to. I seriously doubt that amounts of 0.01, 0.03 had any impact on these ratios over here, so I don't think you have to be concerned with boom length. But you've got to look at all of this data to make your analysis in your conclusion section. So the numbers are in your text. You discuss them in data and observations. You presented the weighted ratios in your abstract. Then you've got to make your analysis using those numbers in your discussion and your conclusion section. This is what your works cited section should look like. You have to have the manual in here, and this is what the citation should look like. This is for Lab 1B. More than one citation in this section is very good if you want to go to other sources to gather other information. You should certainly do that. Put them in the section, have in-text citations to them. And again, you're using the format that I showed you before called author date. And when I use the author, comma, the year is 2019. You would use the same thing for the other sources here. Your original data is where you put your lab notes. Your lab notes belong in original data and only there. You should not have your lab notes in any other section of the report. Now, the examples that I showed you of illustrations use what is called sentence case. This is another example of sentence case up here, right? So the first letter of the first word in the caption is capitalized. The other words that are not proper nouns are not capitalized. There's a period at the end. The second way you can do this is called title case. What title case says is that you have to capitalize all of the important words. So these would be important words. Words like and, of, the would not be capitalized. And you can see with title case, there's no period at the end. So you really have a choice to make here. You can use sentence case with no period at the end. You can use title case with a period at the end or not. Whichever choice you make, you've got to use it consistently from start to finish in your lab report. So the choice is up to you. If you know one of these styles and you've been using one of these styles previously, continue to use that style and use it consistently. But these are really the two choices available to you. So the in-text references are the same for both styles. So for figure 1, it's figure 1 in parentheses, or you can do as shown in figure 1, and then you go on to talk about what's in figure 1. So those are the choices that are available to you, and you have to make a choice again. Be consistent, whichever choice you make. Let's talk about equations. This becomes a bit more complex here. So without text here, this is what an equation should look like on your page. Here's the equation centered in the middle of the page. I ask my students to use equation editor. Don't cut and paste a screenshot from a manual. Use equation editor. And then it's identified by this number in parentheses that's placed flush right on the page. Right? So that's for equations. So the equation should be on a separate line. It's not in the text. It's on a separate line. It's centered. There's no colon or period in the sentence that is sort of introducing that equation. And the number, usually on the right for this class, it should be on the right. And so this is what it should look like. This would be an example of the ideal gas law. As you can see, the equation PV equals nRT is centered. It's identified by the number, which is flush right on the page. Then the number follows the ideal gas law there in the text, and the text wraps around the equation. Everyone got it? That's what I look for in my labs. I don't know what your writing consultants have told you in other classes. We don't have a formal standard, but that's what I would ask you to do if you were in one of my sections. And I should tell you, this is what you're going to be required to do in other classes as you continue your career here at Tandon, and it certainly will be what you're required to do in your professional career after you graduate. So I would strongly suggest you get in the habit of doing this now. Some classes, one of the TAs in one of my sections tells me that in your physics class, is everyone taking physics? No. Okay, so when you get into physics, they're going to make you do this. If you don't do it, they're going to penalize you, and apparently quite seriously, or so I'm told. What I'm told, they're mean in physics. What can I tell you? So, but you should start doing it now. Get into the habit of doing it, so it's second nature when you start taking physics. So to make that number, on the flush right side of the page, go to your Insert tab, and I'm talking about Word here, right? Not Google Docs or Pages or some other application that you shouldn't be using to write your lab report. Go to the Insert tab, click on Text Box, scroll down to Draw Text Box, create the text box, make it flush right, enter the parentheses and the number, correct the font and the type by going to your Home tab and making certain the font in the box is the same as the font that you're using to write the rest of the report. Then you want to click on the text box again. You should get a link at the top of your toolbar that says Shape Outline. Go to Shape Outline and select No Outline. Right? So that's how you should do that. So these are some general notes on your lab reports. So all of your illustrations have to be labeled and you have to have in-text references to them. There is no reason to have an illustration in your report if you do not have an in-text reference to it. There must be in-text references to all of the sources in your works cited section. So again, you use the author date format that I showed you before. Your report must use the passive voice. Anyone having trouble with a passive voice? One person? Well, that's good. Two. All right. So look, if you go to et.poly.edu and under technical writing, there's a PowerPoint you can download there that will assist you with a passive voice. You can also go to the tutoring center, and if you spend an hour with a tutor there, I promise you after the hour you'll get it right. They know how to drill you on this, and they're very good about it. They're practiced at doing it, so you can spend an hour there to get some assistance. And I strongly suggest that you complete a draft of your lab report 48 to 72 hours before it's due. Set it aside for a while. Go back to it, check it, make corrections to it if need be, and then that's the version that you're going to submit. And as always, read the assignment section for every lab report. You've got to respond to the questions and the things that we ask you to talk about in the assignment section, in the appropriate section in your lab report. So always read that section, and again, I would highlight it, copy it, and paste it into your report. So you've got it sitting in the report in your outline, and you're responding to it in the appropriate section. Questions about lab reports? Yes, sir. Let me get your microphone. Hang on a second.
So my question is about how passive voice is used. Passive voice in lab reports just used to eliminate pronouns that show that you're doing the lab, or do you also have to use passive voice to, let's say, I was describing how the code instructs the robot to go somewhere. So am I allowed to say actively, the code instructed the robot to drive by these tiles that follow the line? Like, am I allowed to say that, or do
That
I
is the passive voice. What you just used is the passive voice.
instructed the robot?
Yes.
That's passive voice?
Yes. As opposed to writing, I wrote the code that instructed the robot to go to such and such a place. The purpose, first of all, the passive voice is standard in technical communication.
So I don't just have to say, like, the robot was instructed to go to tile 5. I can actually say the code instructed the robot to go.
Yes, both of those are correct. I would accept both of them. You see, you do know how to use the passive. No? But here's the basic rule. If you're using I, we, me, the team, the students, the engineers, you're not using the passive voice. So banish those words from your vocabulary when you're writing your lab report. One thing you can do, I think that grammar check applications stink. I think they're useless. The one thing they're good for is checking to see if you're using the passive voice. Grammar check applications typically don't like the passive voice, so you'll get that line underneath it, and you'll get the note that says, this is the passive voice, wouldn't you like to change it? And of course you don't change it, because what you're doing is correct. Any other questions? No questions?
Alright, so I actually have like two questions. The first one is for labeling your pictures, the captions. Do they have to be in italics or no?
No, does not have to be in italics.
And also going back to the passive voice question, wouldn't it be the robot was instructed by the code? Or
That's fine too.
oh, okay. Because it sounded really active to me, the other one.
Yeah, that's not the measure of whether or not it's the passive voice.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Or from a
So
passive voice.
here's the thing about special characters, about italicizing.
Okay.
If you use special characters, that places a responsibility on you to go back through the entire report and make certain that you're doing it consistently. Now, your time is your time, and you can spend your time doing that, or you can just skip italicizing, figure the labels and captions, and not spend time checking for that in every lab report that you get. Now, some classes here at Camden, professors may require that sort of thing from you. That's the kind of question you want to ask at the start of the class, right? What style guide do you use? What are your requirements of the reports? But for this class, italicizing special characters in general, bolding, italicizing, underlining, as far as I'm concerned, it adds no value to the report. So I think it's a waste of your time, but you're welcome to do whatever you want with your own time.
Thank you.
Okay, I just kind of confused. You said like mix of tenses and like discussion and conclusion. And like introduction, you said like you can mix your tenses. Like how exactly you should?
Well, so in the introduction, if you're discussing what you did in the lab, that's got to be in the past tense, right? If you're talking about what you did in the past. So if you're talking about booms, you're talking about the definition of stress and strain. That's going to be in the present tense because those things are always true, right? The definition of stress and strain is always true. You're not allowed to make it untrue by writing about it in the past tense. In your conclusion, much of it will be written in the past tense, but when you get to those final paragraphs where you're talking about, let's say, improving your boom, so it moves from third place to first, that's going to be in the future, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be a different tense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Also, just another one. What tense should we use in like data observations? Should I use past?
Abstract, procedure, data and observations, past tense. Those sections are written in the past tense. The only exception is if you're talking about something that's always true, such as the definition of stress, the definition of strain.
So
That's going to be written in the present tense. Other than that exception, those three sections, past tense.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
Is there anything perhaps that Duncan has discussed today that is contrary to what you have heard from your writing consultant? Anything that you would want to ask about?
Back here, are you yawning?
Is Arial the font that you want everyone to use, or is there like another font that's better?
I don't care. It's up to you. You know, I'll tell you one thing you can do. This is when students use equation editor, the default font for equation editor is Cambria Math, right? Generally, my preference would be that the font in the entire report be consistent from start to finish. But to change Cambria Math to the font that you're using requires you to click on the equation, then click on equation in your toolbar, click on AB text, then go to your home tab and change the font. Or you can write the entire report in Cambria Math. So, you know, the answer is it's up to you. The only issue would become with equations, but I don't know if your writing professors have an opinion about that. In the final analysis, since I'm not grading your reports, the opinion that really matters is your writing professor's opinion. You said you had two questions? Okay.
The other thing that I just wanted to address, since you mentioned Arial, and we do mention Arial in one of our presentations, And that presentation is how to give a recitation presentation. So we talked about the difference between serif and sans serif fonts, and we ask that you use sans serif fonts like Arial in your presentations. We do not necessarily specify what you should be using for your lab reports. Oh, the question was, can you use Timed New Roman in your report?
It's up to you to pick the font that you want to use.
Any other questions out there?
General question about, do you have any advice in terms of writing lab reports efficiently? Because I feel like I sometimes am spending an excessive amount of time working on it, like over 6 hours working on each lab report. Do you have any advice in improving the efficiency on writing them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have specific advice that would reduce the amount of time you're spending on the report, but I generally tell students to write the data and observation section first. This is pretty common in technical communication. So you put in your pictures, you put in your tables, you label them correctly, then you have a discussion of the pictures, each individual picture, you have a discussion of the data in the table. Now, having put your data in there, you know what you have to write about in the other section, right? So that's where you start. The other thing to bear in mind is that the sections are essentially modular. You can write any one section, and it doesn't prevent you from, you don't have to write them in a particular order. You can write them in any order that you're comfortable with. So you can write data and observations on the day that you perform the lab. Then the next day you could do your conclusion section, right? Because the data is right there. You use that data to support your conclusion for the argument that you're making in your conclusion section. You could write procedure section on the day you perform the lab because your memory of what you did in the lab is more recent. So does this help you at all?
Yeah. I always go from top to bottom.
You don't have to go from top to bottom. You can start with data and observations. You can start with procedure.
I'm just so worried about like making sure I don't miss out. Like the TA grades are really, like you miss some one small thing.
Well, that's the TAs use a different rubric than the writing consultants use. And where you might be missing, say, a piece of data, the TAs might take off 10 or 20 points, and a writing consultant will take off 2. So there's going to be disparities between what the TA graders do, what the TA graders give you, and what the writing consultants give you. Most important to bear in mind in this class, we're not looking for perfection, right? We're not looking for perfect data. We're looking for your best explanation of the data you produce in the lab. And over the course of the semester, we want to see improvement, right? You know, we're not expecting to get 100 from the start to the finish. What we do want to see is that if you started at 70 on your first lab report, we'd like to see you get to 90 at the end of the semester. So,
one other thing is that Duncan mentioned at the beginning of this session, he pointed out the assignments portion of each lab report, lab write-up. So if you take a look at that section, many of the points that you receive in the lab report are bolded, pointed questions in that section for you to answer. So if you do not answer any of those questions, you will probably lose a good chunk of your lab report points. I do have a question over here for you.
So the other point about efficiency in writing is that if you create an outline, that tells you what you're supposed to write in the report. Are you using outlines? So why would you start using outlines? I mean, it has the benefit of telling you what you're going to write in the report. It also imposes what's your typical word count in the lab report? Do you have a typical word count in your lab report? Okay, so it's possible, folks, it's possible that you're writing more than you need to. 2,000, you said, was your word count? Okay, but that was for lab 3?
It's for lobbying.
Okay. So, an outline imposes a certain discipline on you. You write only as much as you need to write because the outline is telling you what to write. So I've had, in years past, I've received reports from students that ran up to 4,000 words. I don't penalize students for writing too much, but I don't need to read the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Right? So an outline is a way of disciplining yourself so you write as much as you need to, but no more than that. Yes?
How far in details should I go in my lab report? Because I feel like I go really far into details, and the TA is still saying that it's not enough.
So to that, I ask you,
Quiet down, please.
do you
Quiet down.
answer the assignment questions that are posed to you?
So,
and it's listed out points, and they're like, you should explain solid points, but it was literally in the paragraph above that.
So in those cases, I would recommend that you speak with your recitation TA to relay that feedback back to your grader, because your graders are human, so it's possible that they just missed it. Okay?
Am I supposed to go like far into detail with all like everything?
The question is, are you supposed to go far into detail about everything? Duncan?
well, first of all, which section are we talking about? All of them?
Yeah, basically all of them. I mean, they just keep giving comments about, I'm not going into details, but it's well written right there, like in the paragraph.
I'm sorry, a TA said it's a well-written nightmare?
No, it's like, the details are in the paragraph, but apparently it's not enough for them. They say like design fixation should be further talked about, but it is talked about in the introduction, and so I don't know how far I'm supposed to go.
Well, it needs to be talked about in the introduction, and then you need to talk about it in the conclusion. So, but I don't think you need to, you might, I suppose if you experience design fixation, you might mention that in the procedures section. But insofar as the things you're talking about are subjective judgments here, I would go to your recitation TA and your recitation professor and say, I disagree with this interpretation. I think I did fulfill this responsibility, and here's where I can show you that in the lab report. Generally, the TAs are not making subjective judgments as much as the writing professors are. The TAs are looking for specific elements, and if they're present, they move on. If they're missing, they deduct points. But if what you're telling me is that this is a subjective judgment, then I think you should complain about that, if you think it's mistaken.
Okay, and just as a reminder, your grader is not your recitation TA. Just as a reminder. None of your graders are teaching this semester. So, but if you do need to reach out to your grader, that is done via the recitation TA. So if you have a question, you don't understand what your grader said, you need more clarification on something, that is something that you can ask of your recitation TA to be relayed back to your grader. And if you do not receive a satisfactory response from your grader, you can then escalate to your recitation professor.
How long does it take to get a TA grade back? Because I've only gotten my writing consultant grade back for the first one.
So typically we tell the graders that it needs to be graded by the recitation of the following week. But whether they're late or not, that's a different story. We do have an automated system that does check and flag to us when the graders are late, and up to this point in the semester, no graders are late. What was that? I would check. So the question was, what should you do if you don't see the return feedback? I would reach out to your recitation team. Any other questions?
if we had access to how the TAs are grading, like their rubric.
Quiet, please. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do we have access to the rubric that the TAs use to grade?
No, you're not allowed to see that apparently. Yes, Peter?
Correct. And you know, really, if you answer the questions that are posed in the assignment section, you should be getting a pretty high grade on the TA's report. If you answer the correct sections and all that.
Are the references in IEEE, MLA, APA, which format do you want them in?
Use our format, that's what I want you to do.
So is that in IEEE?
No, I don't believe it is. It's who made this? Chris Leslie, right?
It was a modified IEEE.
It's a modified IEEE is what it is. Yes, really, you said what? So here's the thing. What you use in this class, you probably cannot use in other classes. What you use in other classes, you probably can't use in other classes. Because professors sometimes will have different requirements for how they want the lab report formats, what they want it to look like, what the references we use, on and on and on. So again, when you start in a class at the beginning of the semester, one of the first questions you put to the professor is, what style guide do you want us to use? Can you give us a copy of that style guide? How do you want references handled? Those are the sorts of questions you want to ask at the start of the semester.
So just to kind of comment a little bit further on the modified IEEE style for references, the reason why we do this is because full IEEE is fairly onerous on the author of the paper. So to make it a little bit easier on you, so the way the IEEE does it is that it's a numbered list of citations that you do, of references. And it's kind of like Wikipedia style, where you do like 1, 2, 5, 7, whatever. And then at the end of the paper, you would have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So here, instead of having you do that in case you insert like a paragraph in the middle and then you have to shift all your references down by 1, to make it easier on you, we just say author date. So in the text, all you need to do is cite the author, comma, the year of the publication. Any other questions? Did I just confuse you all more?
The short answer is we've made it a lot easier for you to do references than using IEEE. You use IEEE, it would drive you nuts. So we're not going to do that. We don't want you spending your time organizing your references on the page.
Any other questions? Okay, so in order for you to receive this extra credit to rewrite your lab reports, remember that when you rewrite your lab report and upload it to submit for grading, that you upload this to Lab 6. Okay, Lab 6 is the rewrite for Lab 1. There is no lab report that is due for Lab 6 because Lab 6 is your model shop session for working on your SLDP projects. Okay, so Lab 6 is the rewrite for Lab 1. If it has not already been done, in the next week or so, you will see that Lab 1 will get disabled and you won't be able to submit to Lab 1, you will only be able to submit to Lab 6. Lab 6 right now is grayed out for you until we enter in your attendance for this session. So in about a week from now, if you do not see Lab 6 enabled for you in your submit list, please reach out to your Rest Station TA, let them know. Just to make sure, everyone came in through this door, TAs, can you wave? And got checked in by one of these TAs, not you put your hand down, but one of these TAs here, right? They checked you in by scanning your ID. This is the only way that you get credit for attendance at the session. If you did not get scanned in by the TAs at this door, then you will not receive attendance credit for this session. So if you did not do that, please let us know right now. Otherwise,
did anyone not get scanned in?